A Ghost Story by Mark Twain.
I took a large room far up Broadway in a huge old building whose upper stories had been wholly unoccupied for years until I came. The place had long been given up to dust and cobwebs, to solitude and silence. I seemed groping among the tombs and invading the privacy of the dead that first night I climbed up to my quarters. For the first time in my life, a superstitious dread came over me, and as I turned a dark angle in the stairway, an invisible cobweb swung itself into my face and clung there. I shuddered as one who had encountered a phantom. I was glad enough when I reached my room and locked out the mold and darkness. A cheery fire burned in the grate, and I sat down before it with a comforting sense of relief. For 2 hours I sat there, thinking of bygone times, recalling old scenes, and summoning half-forgotten faces out of the mists of the past, listening in fancy to voices that long ago grew silent for all time, and to once familiar songs that nobody sings now. And as my revelry softened down to a sadder and sadder pathos, the shrieking of the winds outside softened to a wail. The angry beating of the rain against the panes diminished to a tranquil patter, and one by one, the noises in the street subsided, until the hurrying footsteps of the last belated straggler died away in the distance and left no sound behind. The fire had burned low. A sense of loneliness crept over me. I arose and put on my pajamas, moving on tiptoe about the room, doing stealthily what I had to do, as if I were surrounded by sleeping enemies whose slumbers it would be fatal to break. I covered up in bed and lay listening to the rain and wind and to the faint creaking of distant shutters till they lulled me to sleep. I slept deeply, but how long I do not know. All at once I found myself awake and filled with a shuddering despair. All was still, all but my own heart. I could hear it beat. Presently, the covers began to slip slowly toward the foot of my bed, as if someone were pulling them. I could not stir. I could not speak. Still, the blankets slipped deliberately away till my chest was uncovered. Then, with a great effort, I seized them and drew them over my head. I waited. Listen. Waited. Once more that steady pull began. And once more I lay terrified, a century of dragging seconds till my chest was uncovered again. At last, I roused my energies and snatched the covers back to their place and held them with a strong grip. I waited. By and by, I felt a faint tug and took a fresh grip. The tug strengthened to a steady strain. It grew stronger and stronger. My hold parted, and for the third time the blanket slipped away. I groaned. An answering groan came from the foot of the bed. Beaded drops of sweat stood on my forehead. I was more dead than alive. Presently, I heard a heavy footstep in my room, the step of an elephant, it seemed to me. It was nothing like anything human, but it was moving away from me. There was relief in that. I heard it approach the door, pass through without moving bolt or lock, and wander away among the dismal corridors, straining the floors and joists till they creaked again, and then silence rang once more. When my excitement had calmed, I said to myself, "This is a dream, simply a hideous dream." And so I lay thinking it over until I convinced myself that it was a dream. And then a comforting laugh exited my lips, and I was happy again. I got up and struck a light, and when I found the locks and bolts were just as I had left them, another soothing laugh welled in my heart and rippled from my lips. I took my pipe and lit it, and was just sitting down before the fire when down went the pipe out of my nerveless fingers. the blood draining from my cheeks, and my placid breathing was cut short with a gasp. In the ashes on the hearth, side by side with my own bare footprint, was another, so vast in comparison, mine was but an infant's. Then I had a visitor, and the elephant tread was explained. I put out the light and returned to bed, shaking with fear. I lay down a long time, peering into the darkness and listening. Then I heard a grating noise overhead, like the dragging of a heavy body across the floor. Then the throwing down of the body and the shaking of my windows was the response to the concussion. In distant parts of the building, I heard the muffled slamming of doors. I heard, at intervals, stealthy footsteps creeping in and out among the corridors and up and down the stairs. Sometimes these noises approached my door, hesitated, and went away again. I heard the clanking of chains faintly in remote passages and listened while the clanking grew nearer, while it wearily climbed the stairways, marking each move by those loose surplus of chain that fell with an accented rattle upon each succeeding step as the goblin that bore it advanced. I heard murmured sentences, half-uttered screams that seemed smothered violently, and the swish of invisible garments and the rush of invisible wings. Then I became conscious that my chamber was invaded, that I was not alone. I heard sighs and breathing about my bed. 3 little spheres of phosphorescent light appeared on the ceiling directly over my head, glowed there a moment, and then dropped, 2 of them upon my face and 1 upon the pillow. They splattered liquidly and felt warm. Intuition told me that they had turned into gouts of blood as they fell. I needed no light to satisfy myself of that. Then I saw pallid faces, dimly luminous, and white uplifted hands floating bodilessly in the air, floating a moment and then disappearing. The whispering ceased, and the voices and the sounds and a solemn stillness followed. I waited and listened. I felt that I must have light or die. I was weak with fear. I slowly raised myself toward a sitting position, and my face came in contact with a clammy hand. All the strength went from me apparently, and I fell back like a stricken person. Then I heard the rustle of a garment. It seemed to pass to the door and go out. When everything was still once more, I crept out of bed, weak and afraid, and lit the gas with a hand that trembled as if it had aged 100 years. The light brought some little cheer to my spirits. I sat down and fell into a dreamy contemplation of that great footprint in the ashes. By and by, its outlines began to waver and grow dim. I glanced up, and the broad gas flame was slowly wilting away. In the same moment, I heard that elephantine tread again. I noted its approach, nearer and nearer, along the musty halls, and dimmer the light waned. The tread reached my very door and paused. The light had dwindled to a sickly blue, and all things about me were in a sickly spectral twilight. The door did not open, and yet I felt a faint gust of air fan my cheek, and presently was conscious of a huge, cloudy presence before me. I watched it with fascinated eyes. A pale glow stole over the thing. Gradually, its cloudy folds took shape. An arm appeared, then legs, then a body, and at last a great, sad face looked out of the vapor. Stripped of its filmy housings, muscular and comely, the majestic Cardrift giant loomed above me. All of my misery vanished, for a child might know no harm could come from that benign countenance. My cheerful spirits returned at once, and in sympathy with them the gas turned up brightly again. Never a lone outcast was so glad to welcome company as I was to greet the friendly giant. I said, "Why, is it nobody but you? Do you know I have been scared to death for the last 2 or 3 hours? I am most honestly glad to see you. I wish I had a chair. Here. Don't try to sit down in that thing." But it was too late. He was in it before I could stop him, and down he went. I never saw a chair shattered so much in my life. Stop. You'll ruin Too late again. There was another crash, and another chair was resolved to its original elements. Confound it! Haven't you got any judgment at all? Do you want to ruin all the furniture on the place? Here, you petrified fool! But it was no use. Before I could arrest him, he had sat down on the bed, and it was a melancholy ruin. Now, what sort of way is that to do? First you come lumbering about the place, bringing a legion of vagabond goblins along with you to worry me to death, and then, when I overlook an indelicacy of costume which would not be tolerated anywhere by cultivated people, you repay me by wrecking all the furniture you can find to sit down on. And why will you? You damage yourself much as you do me. You have broken off the end of your spinal and littered up the floor with chips of your hands till the place looks like a marble yard. You ought to be ashamed of yourself, and you are big enough to know better. Well, I will not have you break any more furniture. Well, I will not break any more furniture, but what am I to do? I have not a chance to sit down for a century. And the tears came into his eyes. Poor devil, I said. I should not have been so harsh with you. And you are an orphan too, no doubt. But sit down on the floor there. Nothing else can stand your weight. And besides, we cannot be sociable with you anyway up there above me. I want you down where I can perch on this stool and gossip with you face to face. So he sat down on the floor and lit a pipe which I gave him, threw one of my red blankets over his shoulders, inverted one of my large tubs onto his head helmet fashion, and made himself picturesque and comfortable. While I renewed the fire, he exposed his large honeycombed bottom feet to the grateful warmth. What is the matter with the bottom of your feet and the back of your legs that they are so gouged up? Infernal chilblains. I caught them near up to the back of my head, roosting out there under Newell's farm. But I love that place. I love it as one loves his old home. There is no peace for me like the peace I feel when I am there. We talked along for half an hour, and then I noticed that he looked tired, and I spoke of it. Tired, he said. Well, I should think so. And now I will tell you all about it, since you have treated me so well. I am the spirit of the petrified man that lies across the street there in the museum. I am the ghost of the Cardrift giant. I can have no rest, no peace, till I have given that poor body burial again. Now, what was the most natural thing for me to do, to make men satisfy this wish? Terrify them, haunt the place where the body lay. So I haunted the museum night after night. I got the other spirits to help me, but it did no good, for nobody ever came to the museum at midnight. Then it occurred to me to come over the way and haunt this place a little. I felt that if I ever got a hearing, I must succeed, for I had the most efficient company that tradition could furnish. Night after night, we have shivered through these mildewed halls, dragging chains, groaning, whispering, tramping up and down stairs, till, to tell you the truth, I am almost worn out. But when I saw a light in your room tonight, I roused my energies again and went at it with a deal of the old freshness. But I am tired out, entirely exhausted. Give me, I beseech you, give me some hope. I lit off my chair in a burst of excitement and exclaimed, This transcends everything that did ever occur. Why, you poor, blundering old fossil. You have had all your trouble for nothing. You have been haunting a plaster cast of yourself. The real Cardiff giant is in Albany. Confound it, don't you know your own remains? I never saw such an eloquent look of shame, of pitiable humiliation overspread a countenance before.